They say the devil is in the details. A clever phrase, something you might see elegantly lettered on a motivational poster in a high-end gift shop. For me, it wasn't a turn of phrase. It was a prophecy fulfilled. The devil wasn't in a clandestine whisper overheard through a door, or a smudge of unfamiliar lipstick on a shirt collar. It was far more insidious, far more modern. It was a digital ghost, an echo of a voice, hiding in the vast, sterile memory of the cloud. My world didn't end with a bang. It began to unravel with a song. It all started on a Tuesday so painfully, excruciatingly ordinary, that its memory now feels like a meticulously crafted insult from the universe. The sky outside our Austin home was a vast, indifferent blue. The air was warm with the promise of a Texas spring. It was a day for grocery lists and client emails, for the comfortable, predictable rhythm of a life well lived. Our home, a sleek, modern farmhouse nestled in the leafy, affluent enclave of Tarrytown, was more than just a house. It was my sanctuary, a testament to a shared dream. Every minimalist light fixture, every piece of locally sourced art, every polished concrete floor was a decision Mark and I had made together. 12 years of marriage had woven our lives into a single, seamless tapestry. Or so I believed. Mark was a force of nature in Austin's cutthroat real estate market, a developer whose ambition was as sharp and unforgiving as the summer sun. His name was synonymous with success, with turning dusty lots into gleaming towers. I was the counterpoint, the creative, the founder of Phoenix Designs, a boutique graphic design agency with a studio in a trendy downtown loft. To the outside world, we were a power couple, the ones people pointed to at charity galas and weekend barbecues. "Look at the Hazes," they'd murmur. "They have it all. Successful careers, a beautiful home, and easy, attractive chemistry." We had the right life, the right friends, the right zip code. We were a living, breathing advertisement for a life I had foolishly thought was real. That particular evening, the house was filled with the rich, comforting aroma of his favorite dish, a saffron and Parmesan risotto. It's a ridiculously complex meal, one that demands your undivided attention, a constant, patient stirring. It was a labor of love, a ritual I performed to welcome him home. Our kitchen echo show was playing a curated playlist of indie folk, the gentle acoustic soundtrack to our supposed domestic bliss. As I stirred, letting the steam warm my face, I tried to recall the name of a song we'd heard the previous weekend. We'd been at The Wanderer, a cozy, dimly lit wine bar on South Congress, sharing a bottle of Pinot Noir and laughing about something I can no longer remember. The melody was stuck in my head, a beautiful, haunting tune, but the artist's name was just beyond my grasp. "Alexa, what was that song we liked at The Wanderer last Saturday?" I asked the quiet room, my voice casual, expecting a simple answer. The device, perched on the edge of the pristine quartz countertop, remained silent. Its blue light didn't even flicker. It hadn't heard me over the sizzle of the risotto. Wiping my hands on my linen apron, I walked over to the small screen, a faint annoyance prickling me. I tapped the screen to view my recent activity, figuring it would be faster to just scroll back through my own voice commands. My finger slid down the smooth glass, past my mundane requests for timers, measurement conversions, and weather updates. It was a digital diary of a normal life. And then my finger stopped. My breath caught in my throat. There it was. A command from the day before, logged at 3:17 p.m. The timestamp burned itself into my memory. It was from Mark, and as I tapped it, his voice, so familiar, so beloved, filled the silent kitchen, clear as a bell. "Alexa, play our song." A small, reflexive smile touched my lips, a sweet gesture, but the music that began to drift from the speaker was not our song. It wasn't the Ben Howard track we'd danced to at our wedding under a canopy of oak trees and fairy lights. It wasn't the Lumineers' anthem we'd belted out on our first road trip through the winding roads of hill country. It was a sultry, slow-burn R&B track, all breathy vocals and a deep, pulsing bass line I had never, ever heard before. My smile faltered, wilting on my face. A cold knot formed in the pit of my stomach. "It's just a mistake," a voice in my head insisted. "He found a new song he likes, and he's being sentimental. That's all." But I knew, with a certainty that defied all logic, that it wasn't a mistake. My hand trembled as I scrolled further, and then I saw the next entry. A snippet. The kind Alexa accidentally records when it mishears its wake word. A digital eavesdropper. This time, it wasn't Mark's voice that played. It was a woman. She was laughing. A light, airy, carefree sound that felt like a physical violation, a trespasser in the sacred space of my home. And then, I heard Mark's voice again, but it wasn't the voice he used with me. It was lower, softer, laced with an intimacy that was a punch to the gut. "See, Isabel? I told you it was better than your playlist." The world didn't just tilt on its axis. It shattered. The heavy silver spoon slipped from my nerveless fingers, clattering onto the countertop with a sound that seemed to echo for an eternity. Isabel. The name was alien. It hung in the air between the music and the scent of my cooking, thick, suffocating, and poisonous. My fingers flew across the screen, frantic now. More snippets. "Alexa, turn the lights down." That was his voice. The command was followed by a soft giggle. Hers. "Alexa, stop." His voice, sharp and final, cutting off the recording. Cutting off my world. My heart hammered against my ribs, a wild, panicked bird trapped in a cage. This couldn't be happening. Not to us. Not to Mark, the man who held my hand every night before we fell asleep, his thumb tracing patterns on my palm. Not the man whose future was so fundamentally intertwined with mine that I couldn't see where I ended and he began. We weren't just married, we were an institution. I forced myself to play the snippets again. And again. The laughter, the name, his intimate tone, the shared song that wasn't ours. Each replay was a fresh stab of betrayal, each note a new twist of the knife. On the stove, the risotto was forgotten. A thin curl of black smoke began to rise as the rice scorched and burned at the bottom of the expensive copper pan, filling the air with an acrid, bitter smell. It was the smell of ruin, the smell of the moment my perfect, curated life was revealed to be nothing more than a perfectly constructed lie. I slid down the sleek cabinetry of the kitchen island, my legs giving out beneath me. The cool stone was a shock against my back. I sat there on the floor of my dream kitchen, surrounded by the scent of burning food and the digital ghost of my husband's infidelity, which echoed in the crushing silence of our beautiful, hollow home. The first few days after the discovery were a masterclass in dissociation. I existed in a thick, soundproof fog, moving through the routines of my life with the numb precision of a robot. I was a ghost in my own home, a polite, smiling specter haunting the hallways of my marriage. On the surface, I was Clara Hayes, successful business owner, loving wife. I made coffee. I discussed client projects. I picked up dry cleaning. But inside, a Category 5 hurricane of grief, rage, and confusion was tearing me apart. Mark, in his blissful, self-absorbed ignorance, noticed nothing. He was as attentive as ever, which was, I now realized, not very attentive at all. He'd kiss me goodbye in the morning, a perfunctory peck on the cheek, and his lips, which I once found so familiar, now tasted of coffee and deceit. He'd text me, "Love you," in the middle of the afternoon, and the 3 little words on my screen would flash like a neon sign of his hypocrisy. Every, "I'm working late, honey," was no longer a simple statement of fact. It was a question mark, a potential lie. Every out-of-town business trip became a suspected tryst, every late-night call a potential conversation with her. My trust, once the bedrock of our marriage, had been pulverized into fine, worthless dust. I couldn't confront him. Not yet. The shock was too raw, the pain too gaping. And a small, cold part of my brain, the part that had built a business from scratch, knew that a premature confrontation would only give him the chance to lie, to gaslight me, to twist the narrative. I needed more than a ghost on a smart speaker. I needed an arsenal. So, I became a detective in the crime scene of my own marriage. The hunt for truth became a grim, all-consuming obsession. It began where most modern betrayals are logged, in the cold, hard data of our finances. Late at night, when Mark was asleep beside me, his steady breathing a sound I could no longer bear, I would slip out of bed. I'd creep into my home office, the glow of the monitor a stark light in the darkness, and I would dive into the rabbit hole of our shared accounts. For hours, I'd pore over credit card statements, my designer's eye, usually trained to find harmony in color and form, now scanning for dissonance, for anomalies. And they were there, sprinkled like poison amongst the mundane charges for Whole Foods groceries, gas fill-ups, and our mortgage payment. There it was. A dinner for two at Uchi, one of Austin's most notoriously expensive and romantic restaurants. The charge was for over $400. On a Tuesday night, he was supposedly at a mandatory networking event with the guys from Dallas. I checked his calendar. The event was there, a solid block of time, a perfect alibi. My hands grew cold. I kept digging. A recurring charge, every 3 weeks, for a room at the Driscoll Hotel, the historic, opulent heart of downtown Austin. Always on a weeknight. Always checked in around 4 p.m. and out by 7 p.m. Not an overnight stay. An assignation. A 3-hour window of betrayal carved out of his workday. Then came the charge that made me physically ill. A purchase from a high-end lingerie boutique in the Domain, a place that sold delicate, expensive things made of lace and silk. The amount was significant. These were not items I had ever seen, let alone worn. I pictured him buying them. I pictured her wearing them. The image was so vivid, so visceral, that I had to rush to the bathroom, my stomach heaving. Each discovery was a new layer of psychological torture, a fresh wave of nausea and pain. But with each piece of evidence, my grief began to undergo a strange and terrible alchemy. It began to crystallize, to harden, to transform into something colder, sharper, and infinitely more dangerous. It was anger, a deep, seismic rage that demanded more than just tears and a quiet, dignified divorce. It demanded retribution. This wasn't just an affair, it was a campaign of profound disrespect. He hadn't just cheated on me. He had bankrolled his betrayal with our shared future, with my hard work. I knew, with chilling certainty, that I couldn't navigate this alone. The weight of the secret was crushing me. My best friend, Leo, was also my business partner. We had built Phoenix Designs from nothing but a shared laptop and a dream in a tiny, cramped office in East Austin. He was the calm, logical yin to my creative, sometimes chaotic yang. He knew me better than anyone, even Mark. I called him on a Thursday afternoon. My voice was a tight, strained whisper. "Leo," I managed to say, "I need you." I didn't need to say more. He was at my house within the hour. He didn't come empty-handed. He brought a large container of my favorite tortilla soup from Central Market, a gesture of comfort that almost made me break down right there on the doorstep. I led him into the living room, a space usually filled with art and light, which now felt like a mausoleum. I didn't cry. I was past tears. In a flat, emotionless voice, I laid it all out for him on the polished concrete floor. The printed Alexa logs, the highlighted credit card statements, the meticulously constructed timeline of lies. He listened in complete silence, his usual easygoing expression shifting through a kaleidoscope of emotions. First concern, then disbelief, then shock, and finally, a quiet, simmering fury that mirrored my own. He looked at the evidence, then at me, at the hollowed-out version of the woman he'd known for a decade. When I finally finished, my voice raw, choking back a sob that had been lodged in my throat for days, he didn't offer the empty platitudes I had been dreading. He didn't say, "I'm so sorry," or, "Maybe there's an explanation." He simply reached out, put a steadying hand on my arm, and looked me directly in the eye. His gaze was unwavering. "Okay, Clara," he said, his voice low and firm. "We don't get sad, we get strategic." Those words became my mantra, my lifeline for the next 6 months. Leo was my rock, my general, my co-conspirator. He dragged me out of the fog of my grief and reminded me of who I was. I wasn't just a heartbroken wife. I was the founder and creative director of Phoenix Designs. I was a businesswoman. I was a fighter. I was a phoenix. And it was time to burn my old life to the absolute ground and see what could rise from the ashes. Our first strategic move was to secure legal counsel. Leo, of course, knew someone. "She's not cheap, and she's not nice," he warned me, "but she is the absolute best." Her name was Diana Salazar, and to call her a lawyer was an understatement. She was a surgical instrument of legal warfare, a legend in Texas divorce courts. Diana's office was on the 40th floor of a downtown skyscraper, a sterile world of glass, steel, and intimidating panoramic views of the city. Diana herself was a woman in her late 50s, with a mane of silver-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun and obsidian eyes that seemed to dissect a lie from 100 paces. She listened to my story and reviewed my mountain of evidence without a single flicker of emotion, her face a mask of professional neutrality. When I was done, she leaned back in her leather chair, steepling her fingers. "This is thorough, Ms. Hayes," she said, her voice as crisp as a fresh-printed legal document. "The digital trail is a prosecutor's dream. It's sloppy. It's arrogant. So the question is, what is the end game here? Do we want an amicable split, divide the assets according to community property laws, and walk away with your dignity and a clean break? Or," she paused, her dark eyes glinting, "do we want to go scorched earth?" I looked at Leo, who was sitting beside me, a silent pillar of support. He gave me a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. I thought of the laughter in the Alexa recording. I thought of the lingerie I never wore. I thought of the 12 years of my life I had invested in a lie. The desire for a clean break had long since evaporated. "Scorched earth," I said, and my voice was devoid of the tremble I felt deep inside my bones. "I want him to understand, on a cellular level, what he has thrown away. I don't just want to divorce him. I want to dismantle him." A slow, predatory smile spread across Diana's face. It was a chilling and deeply satisfying sight. "Excellent," she purred, leaning forward. "I do love a good demolition project. Let's get to work." The plan we formulated over the next few weeks in Diana's sterile, high-altitude office was a masterpiece of legal, financial, and psychological warfare. It was intricate, multi-layered, and utterly ruthless. It had 3 distinct phases, each designed to systematically strip Mark of his power, his wealth, and his reputation. This was Diana's domain. She started by dissecting our prenuptial agreement, a document we'd signed a decade ago, young, in love, and hopelessly naive. "It's surprisingly vague," she announced with satisfaction. "Full of loopholes a competent lawyer could drive a truck through. He probably had his corporate attorney draft it to save a few bucks. A fatal mistake." But the real bombshell was her discovery regarding our joint savings account. It was an account I had contributed to significantly over the years, pouring in profits from my business. Diana's forensic accountant found that Mark had been using this account as his personal slush fund for the affair. The expensive dinners, the hotel rooms, the gifts for Isabel. It was all financed with our money. My money. "This isn't just infidelity, Clara," Diana explained, her voice cold as steel. "This is fraudulent depletion of marital assets, and that gives us tremendous leverage." The first step was to build my financial fortress. We moved immediately to legally separate my business, Phoenix Designs, from our marital assets. Diana's team drafted a compelling argument that the business was a pre-existing entity whose growth was a direct result of my sole effort, talent, and labor. We ring-fenced it completely. Then came the delicate operation of draining our joint finances. Under Diana's precise guidance, I began a systematic and entirely legal withdrawal of my half of all joint funds. I opened new bank accounts, new investment portfolios, all under my name only. Each transfer was carefully calculated to remain below the federal reporting threshold, avoiding any red flags. I left just enough in the joint accounts to cover our usual household expenses, to maintain the illusion of normalcy. Quietly, methodically, I was building a war chest. Mark, who rarely looked at the detailed statements, noticed nothing. We needed more than just financial records. The court of public opinion, where the real damage would be done, required something more visceral. Diana could handle the legal battle, but the war for the narrative was mine to wage. Hiring a private investigator felt too cliché, too risky. Mark was paranoid. He would spot a tail a mile away. So, I decided to use his own personality, his own obsessions, against him. Mark was a tech evangelist and a fitness fanatic. His upcoming birthday was the perfect opportunity. "I got you something," I told him one evening, my voice dripping with the false sweetness I had perfected. I handed him a beautifully wrapped box from his favorite high-end running store, Luke's Locker. Inside was the latest Garmin Fenix smartwatch, the top-of-the-line model with every conceivable biometric sensor. "To help you track your marathon training," I said, smiling the smile of a devoted wife. "It has advanced GPS, heart rate, everything." His eyes lit up. He was like a child on Christmas morning. What he didn't know was that I had spent an entire afternoon setting it up. I created a new Garmin family account, supposedly so we could share our fitness goals and motivate each other. I linked his new watch to this shared cloud account, an account to which I held the master password. From that moment on, I had access to all his data, every run, every step, every GPS location, every heartbeat, every sleep cycle. It wasn't a gift. It was a digital leash. Next, I weaponized our home network. I began complaining vociferously about our spotty Wi-Fi, a problem that didn't actually exist. "Mark, I keep dropping client calls. We have to do something." He, of course, agreed that only the best technology would do for our home. I ordered a new, powerful Eero mesh router system. Leo, my ever-loyal tech wizard, came over on a Saturday to install it, a favor he was ostensibly doing for a friend. While Mark was out on a long run, tracked meticulously by his new watch, Leo went to work. He didn't just install the routers. He delved deep into the system's administrative settings. He enabled advanced parental controls and verbose logging features, all under the guise of optimizing our network security. From that point forward, every single device that connected to our home network, every phone, every laptop, every tablet, left a detailed digital footprint. I would have a log of every website visited, every connection time, every unique device MAC address. The trickle of information soon became a flood. The Garmin watch was a relentless informant. Its GPS data showed him not at the downtown gym, but at a boutique hotel in the trendy South Congress district. Twice a week, like clockwork. His heart rate, a fascinatingly objective measure of his lives, would spike to 120 beats per minute at odd hours of the night when he was supposedly sleeping alone at a conference in Dallas. The Wi-Fi logs were even more damning. They revealed the existence of a second phone, a device I'd never seen, with a generic network name, a burner phone. It connected to our home network only late at night, after I was supposedly asleep. And right alongside it, another device would often connect. Isabel's iPhone. They were in my house. The audacity of it stole my breath. Leo and I dug into the other woman, Isabel Carter, a 26-year-old junior associate at his firm. Her public Instagram profile was a nauseatingly curated feed of avocado toast, yoga poses in front of scenic murals, and inspirational quotes about living your truth and manifesting your destiny. My stomach churned with a mixture of rage and a strange, bitter pity. I was a wife, a partner, a business owner. She was a hashtag. She was a cliché. And she was sleeping with my husband in my home. This phase was my masterpiece. It was where my grief and my professional skills converged into a singular, terrible purpose. Mark's entire career, his entire identity, was built on his public image, the charismatic, visionary, trustworthy developer who was reshaping the Austin skyline. His latest project, the ultra-luxury high-rise on the shores of Lady Bird Lake, called the Azure, was his magnum opus, the jewel in his professional crown. The launch party for the Azure was scheduled in 3 months. It was set to be the society event of the season, a massive gala for hundreds of investors, city officials, journalists, and the Austin elite. That party, Mark's night of ultimate triumph, would become the stage for his public execution. As a graphic designer, I knew the power of a compelling visual narrative. I began to work in secret, late at night in my downtown studio, fueled by coffee and a cold, burning anger. I started compiling all the evidence into a presentation. This was not going to be a boring PowerPoint with bullet points. It was to be a sleek, professionally designed, emotionally devastating timeline of his betrayal. I used my best software, my keenest design sense. I called it the Mark Hayes Project, a study in deceit. It was a work of art. It had elegant infographics charting his cash withdrawals from our joint account. It featured beautifully rendered maps of Austin, with animated lines tracing his secret journeys from the Garmin GPS data, leading from his office directly to Isabel's apartment complex or the Driscoll Hotel. Red dots pulsed over the locations of his trysts. I included screenshots of the Wi-Fi logs, with the burner phone and Isabel's iPhone highlighted. It was cold, it was factual, it was undeniable, and it was absolutely devastating. Leo, my tech accomplice, found a vulnerability in the third-party AV system being used for the gala. He devised a way for us to remotely hijack the presentation feed at the critical moment. The waiting was the hardest part. 3 months of living a lie. 3 months of sleeping next to my husband, of smiling at his jokes, of playing the part of the supportive, loving wife he thought I was. The duality of my existence was exhausting. There were days the rage was a physical presence, a hot, metallic taste in the back of my throat, and I would have to lock myself in my home office and punch a couch pillow until my knuckles were raw and my breathing returned to normal. I channeled all of it, the pain, the anger, the soul-crushing heartbreak, into my work. Phoenix Designs landed 3 of its biggest clients to date. I was sharper, more creative, more focused than I had ever been. I was a woman on a mission, fueled by betrayal and the promise of a spectacular, righteous reckoning. The weeks crawled by, each day a new exercise in self-control. Leo and I held weekly war room meetings in my studio, spreading the growing mountain of evidence across a large white conference table. "He's getting sloppy," Leo noted one night, pointing to a receipt for 2 tickets to a movie at the Alamo Drafthouse. "He didn't even bother to use the burner card for this one." "He's arrogant," I replied, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "He doesn't think I'm smart enough to look. In his mind, I'm just the creative wife who handles the aesthetics of our life while he does the important work." That profound underestimation, I knew, would be his undoing. Meanwhile, Diana was a silent whirlwind of legal preparation. She filed the initial divorce petition under seal, a legal time bomb set to detonate the morning after the gala. She prepared affidavits from forensic accountants. She marshaled financial experts. She had everything ready to go public the moment I gave the word. "When you strike, Clara," she advised me during one of our final meetings, her eyes burning with intensity. "You don't wound. You neutralize. No half measures." The day before the Azure launch party, a strange, preternatural calm washed over me. It was the eerie peace before a hurricane. All the pieces were in place. The digital traps had been sprung, the evidence compiled, the legal weapons sharpened. I had spent months living a double life, my grief and anger simmering beneath a placid, smiling surface. Tomorrow, the world would finally see the fire. I spent that final evening playing my part to perfection. I helped him pick out a tie for the gala, a deep, shimmering blue one to match the azure theme. As I adjusted it around his neck, my fingers brushing against his skin, I felt a chilling detachment. I looked him straight in the eye. "You'll be brilliant tomorrow, Mark," I said, and for the first time in months, I didn't have to fake the smile. It was entirely, terrifyingly real. The night of the gala was a perfect storm of Austin glamour and influence. The event was held in a sprawling, glass-walled venue on the top floor of a downtown tower, offering a breathtaking panorama of the city skyline. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the half-finished azure tower stood like a monument to Mark's ambition, its steel skeleton gleaming under the night sky. The air inside was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, the clinking of champagne flutes, and the low, self-important hum of 100 conversations about money and power. Mark was in his element, a king holding court. He glided through the crowd, a hand on an investor's shoulder here, a shared laugh with a city council member there. His charismatic, easy smile was firmly in place, a mask of confidence and success. And I was the perfect accessory on his arm, draped in a stunning, severe black gown that felt like armor. I smiled, I nodded, I played the part of the proud, supportive wife, all while feeling like a silent, smiling specter of his impending doom. I circulated with him, exchanging pleasantries with people whose lives were about to be sideswiped by the shrapnel of my husband's public implosion. I shook hands with his primary investors, older men with weathered faces and wary eyes. I chatted with the mayor, a woman I'd served on a charity board with. Each smile felt like a betrayal of them, but a necessary act of war. And then, across the crowded room, I saw her. Isabel. She was wearing a crimson dress that was a little too tight, a little too loud for the elegant affair. She stood with a small group of junior associates from Mark's firm, but her eyes, hungry and possessive, never strayed from him. She caught my gaze for a moment and gave me a brief, dismissive nod, the kind of casual acknowledgement one gives to the catering staff or a piece of uninteresting furniture. I just smiled back, a serene, knowing, Mona Lisa smile. "Enjoy your moment," I thought. "It's your last." At precisely 9 p.m., the lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the room. The formal presentation was about to begin. Mark, as the visionary behind the project, was the keynote speaker. This was it, his moment of ultimate triumph. He gave my hand a confident squeeze, whispered, "Wish me luck," and walked toward the stage. He ascended the steps to a wave of enthusiastic applause, beaming under the bright, hot spotlights. I used the distraction to slip away from our table near the front. My heart, which I expected to be hammering, was a steady, cold drum. I moved through the shadows at the edge of the room, my black dress making me nearly invisible. I found Leo near the back, by the audio-visual booth. He was dressed in the all-black uniform of the tech crew, a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He looked up as I approached, his face grim but resolute. He gave me a single sharp nod. It was time. He held up a small tablet, its screen glowing. A single large red button was displayed. The trigger. "Before I talk about the future of Austin living," Mark's voice began, booming and confident through the state-of-the-art sound system, "I want to take a moment to thank the one person who has been my rock, my North Star, my greatest inspiration, my beautiful, brilliant wife, Clara." A single spotlight swung through the darkness, finding me where I stood. I was caught. I hadn't expected this. 100 heads turned in my direction. For a heart-stopping second, I thought the plan was compromised. But I held my composure. I gave a gracious, practiced little wave and met his gaze across the sea of faces. And in that moment, under the full glare of the spotlight, I let him see it. Just for a second. The absolute, unadulterated ice in my eyes. The promise of ruin. I saw a flicker of confusion, of unease, cross his handsome face. He faltered for a fraction of a second before his politician's smile snapped back into place and he turned to the massive, building-sized screen behind him. "Now," he said, raising the small remote in his hand and clicking it with a flourish. "Let's take a look at the Azure." But the image that flashed onto the screen was not a stunning 3D architectural rendering. It was a stark, black title card, designed in a sleek, elegant, minimalist font. My signature font. It read, "The Mark Hayes Project, a study in deceit." A low, confused murmur rippled through the crowd. It was like a wave of static electricity. People leaned towards each other, whispering. On stage, Mark stared at the screen, his smile frozen on his face. He fumbled with the remote, clicking it frantically, his thumb jabbing the button again and again. But nothing happened. Leo had taken control. The presentation was on a pre-timed, unstoppable loop. My presentation. The next slide appeared with an audible, chilling swoosh. It was a timeline. It began with January 14th, 2023. The affair begins. Underneath the text was a high-resolution image of a receipt from the Driscoll Hotel, the charge clearly visible, paid for with the Hayes Joint Savings account. A collective gasp went through the room. Mark's face, projected in horrifying detail on the two side screens flanking the stage, went from confused to chalk white in an instant. The slides advanced relentlessly, one after another, each one a perfectly designed nail in the coffin of his life. A map of Austin appeared, with animated GPS pings from his birthday present Garmin watch. A red line traced his frequent journeys from his downtown office to Isabel's apartment complex in the Bouldan Creek neighborhood. The red dots of his visits clustered around her building like a digital rash. Next, a crisp, clean bar chart. It showed cash withdrawals from our joint account, perfectly cross-referenced with dates and times he had claimed to be working late or traveling for business. Then, a screenshot of the Wi-Fi log from our home. The image was magnified, the relevant lines highlighted in a damning shade of red. Isabel's iPhone and Mark's burner phone, with their unique MAC addresses, shown connecting to our home network at 2:13 a.m. on a night I was in Houston visiting my sick mother. The murmurs grew into shocked, excited whispers. The sea of elegant guests was now a field of glowing rectangles as people pulled out their phones, recording the corporate-sponsored public execution. I saw his primary investors at the front table, their faces masks of open-mouthed horror. I saw his two main business partners get up from their seats and walk purposefully towards the exit, not even bothering to look back. He was radioactive, and they were fleeing the fallout. I had saved the most brutal slide for last. It was a simple, devastating side-by-side comparison. On the left, a professional photograph of me and Mark from a magazine feature a year earlier, captioned, "Austin's Power Couple." We were smiling, the very picture of success and happiness. On the right, a crystal-clear security camera, still that Diana's investigator had managed to legally acquire from the lobby of the Driscoll Hotel. It showed Mark and Isabel, wrapped around each other, kissing passionately by the elevators. The date and timestamp were clearly, indisputably visible at the bottom of the frame. Then, the screen went black. A single line of white text appeared in the center, stark and final. "Any questions? Clara Hayes." Silence. A profound, thick, suffocating silence fell over the ballroom. Every single eye was on the man on the stage. Mark stood frozen, a statue of a broken man, the color completely drained from his face, his mouth slightly agape. He looked like a man who had just watched his own ghost walk through a wall. And in that moment of absolute, ringing silence, as his world lay in smoldering ruins around him, I did the last thing anyone expected. I began to walk toward the stage. My heels clicked with deliberate, measured purpose on the polished floor. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. I ascended the small set of stairs, my expression a mask of cold composure. I walked right up to him, to the hollowed-out shell of the man I had once loved, and I gently took the microphone from his limp, nerveless hand. I turned and looked out at the sea of hundreds of stunned, silent faces. "My apologies for the interruption," I said, my voice calm, clear, and amplified to fill every corner of the vast room. "It appears there's been a significant error in my husband's projections this evening. His assets, and more importantly, his character, seem to be highly overvalued." I placed the microphone carefully on the lectern. I allowed myself one last look at Mark. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was staring at the floor, utterly defeated. I didn't feel the hot sting of anger anymore. I didn't feel the dull ache of pain. I felt nothing but a vast, cold, liberating emptiness. I turned my back on him. I turned my back on the stage, on the life we had built, on the smoldering wreckage of his ambition. And I walked out of that ballroom, head held high, without a single look back. As the heavy glass doors slid shut behind me, I could hear the chaos finally erupt, a roar of voices, of questions, of scandal. But for me, it was over. The fire had done its work, and from the ashes, I was ready to rise. The aftermath was exactly as Diana had predicted: swift, brutal, and absolute. The story of the Azure Gala implosion went viral, first in the tight-knit Austin business community, then across state lines. It was a modern-day scarlet letter, delivered via a jumbotron. The Azure project, Mark's crowning achievement, collapsed as investors, terrified of being associated with the scandal, pulled their funding overnight. His business partners officially dissolved their partnership within a week, invoking a long-dormant morality clause in their contract. Mark wasn't just fired, he was excommunicated. He was ruined, professionally, financially, and socially. Our divorce was a mere formality, the legal equivalent of sweeping up the dust after a demolition. Faced with the mountain of irrefutable, publicly displayed evidence, Mark had no fight left in him. He was a ghost, shuffling through the legal proceedings, his once arrogant posture now stooped and defeated. He signed every single document Diana put in front of him without argument. I got the house, the vast majority of our liquid assets as punitive damages for his financial fraud, and, most importantly, full and unencumbered ownership of my now booming business. The story of the jilted wife who used her graphic design skills to execute the perfect public revenge made me something of a local legend. Phoenix Designs was inundated with calls. They came from women, mostly, but some men too, people who wanted to rebrand their lives after a crisis, who wanted to take control of their own narrative. My deepest pain had inadvertently become my most powerful marketing tool. My company, aptly named, became a symbol of rising from the ashes. I sold the Terrytown house almost immediately. It was a beautiful prison, and every sunlit room was haunted by the ghost of a life that was never real. I took the proceeds and bought a chic, minimalist loft in a converted warehouse on the east side of Austin. It was a space that was entirely my own. The floors were polished concrete, the ceilings were 20 feet high, the old brick walls were exposed, and the windows were massive industrial frames that flooded the space with light. It was raw, it was honest, and it was mine. Leo was there through it all. He was my constant, the steady hand that had guided me through the storm. He helped me negotiate with movers. He helped me choose paint colors. He helped me unpack boxes until late into the night. Our relationship, forged in the crucible of my life's greatest crisis, had fundamentally changed. The comfortable lines between friend and business partner had blurred into something deeper, something more intimate. There was an unspoken understanding between us, a comfortable silence that spoke volumes, a shared history that now included war and reconstruction. One evening, about 6 months after the gala, the chaos had finally settled. We were sitting on the floor of my new, nearly unpacked living room. We were surrounded by a few remaining boxes, sharing a pizza from Via 313 out of the box, and drinking a cheap but celebratory bottle of wine. Through the enormous windows, the city lights of Austin twinkled, a galaxy of possibilities. "You know," Leo said quietly, looking around the sprawling open space, "I've never seen you look more at home, more like yourself." I thought about that. I thought about the woman who had cried on her kitchen floor, her world shattered by a song. I thought about the woman who had coldly, meticulously planned a man's complete destruction. I was no longer either of them. I wasn't a victim, and I wasn't just a survivor. I was the architect. I was the designer of my own life now, from the ground up. "I feel free," I said, and the words were truer than anything I had ever said before. The weight of 12 years of a lie had been lifted, and in its place was a lightness I hadn't realized was possible. Like I can finally, truly, breathe. He smiled, a genuine warm smile that reached his kind eyes. "So, what's next for the great Clara Hayes? What does the Phoenix do after she's finally risen?" I looked at him, at this man who had seen me at my absolute worst, at my most broken, and my most vengeful, and had not only stayed, but had helped me find my best. The future, which had once been a terrifying blank void, now felt like an open road. The story I've just told you is about betrayal, and yes, it's about a spectacular revenge. But I think, in the end, it's really about strength. It's about the terrifying, exhilarating process of finding out who you are when everything you thought defined you is stripped away. It's about the profound realization that sometimes you have to burn an old life to the ground to build something real, something true, something that is entirely, unapologetically your own. So I have to ask you, as you listen to this, have you ever had a moment that completely shattered your reality? A moment that broke you, but in breaking you, forced you to become a version of yourself you never imagined you could be? What did you do with the pieces? Did you crumble, or did you find the strength to pick them up and build your own fire? Let me know your story in the comments below, because every phoenix has to start with a single spark. And if you want to hear more stories about rising from the ashes and taking back control, make sure you subscribe to this channel. There are always more stories to tell.